Quotations from myself, segment 69, quotation number 868. As we in the West, the privileged minority of the world, are bombarded daily by the horrible images of the millions fleeing their collapsing into a nightmare of violence, starvation, and death's native lands. And as these millions threaten to overwhelm us with a flood of refugees, it is easy and excusable to become nostalgic about the times in human history when empires ruled the world and when the countries which, for whatever reasons, would no longer provide even the minimum of personal security to their citizens due to the disintegration of the essential social, political, economic structure, were either conquered by or absorbed into the ones who were capable of such provisions. That is, the country with a stable government and functioning economies. And even if, for a while, these newly conquered fell to the second and third-class citizens, their fate was immeasurably better than that of the hundreds of thousands of Rwandans, Somalis, Yugoslavians, etc. today. For as far as ordinary people, whatever nationality they are concerned, as long as their basic human needs are met, they don't really care who governs them. The perennial mass migration to countries with high standard of living is the best proof of it. And being an immigrant must be the second oldest profession. And if their lot can be improved just by joining the countries which are better off, to avoid the agony of uprooting themselves and going to a strange new land, so much the better. So it is not them but the nation ruling elites who resist the longest the beneficial integration of a small and unable to sustain itself country into a larger and stronger ones. And it is these elites who are ready to fight to the last drop of somebody else's blood to maintain their power and privileges. Of course, all empires, no matter how big and strong they are, eventually die like any other biological or social entities. But it doesn't mean that the idea of mutually beneficial unifications of several mononational countries into multinational one has outlived itself. The death of a single individual does not spell the disappearance of the whole species, and if a small country ceases to be a part of the dead empire, it doesn't mean it cannot join another living one or become fully independent. Now, if the word empire carries unpleasant connotation, perhaps the terms federation or union would be more palatable to those who are more concerned with the semantics than with the substance. Finally, the great irony of all nation liberation movements is that as they culminate in a newly founded independent national state, these new states begin immediately to treat its own ethnic minorities' aspiration for independence with the same ferocious stubbornness and callous insensitivity they experience in similar circumstances themselves, while being the national minority in the bigger unit. Thus, as far as fundamental relationship between the majority and minority in a single state, nothing but the names of the player changes. 869. When Marshall McLuhan first introduced the notion of the global village. It was supposed to describe the world in which everyone, as allegedly in a real village, has an equal access to information. But anyone intimately familiar with village life knows that even in such a small society, only the privileged few knows everything. It is usually the mayor, the sheriff, the doctor, the priest, the madman, who are aware of most people's comings and goings, while the rest consume the diet rich in gossip and rumors and poor in facts. For information gives the power to benefit oneself and to hurt the others. And even in a small village, such power can make a big difference between comfortable life and misery. Undoubtedly, the information age provides ordinary people almost everywhere in the world with ever-increasing amount of information. But from strictly utilitarian point of view, it is all useless. It ostensibly expands one's knowledge, but it doesn't make one's life any better. For the information that does, the kind which can be used to obtain status, power, wealth, etc., has always been and always will be guarded closely and never be given away free, but to be treated only in exchange for the tangible goods. 870. There are seemingly so many different words to choose and different ways to say the same thing, yet the language is such a sensitive tool that each new word and distinct turn of a phrase adds or delete another nuance of meaning. 871. Never acquire the thing, the loss of which you may regret. 872. When I was young, how generous my willingness was to embrace somebody else's suffering, which seemed then so close to my own that I would quite often fully identify it with. But the older I grow, the more I realize how different I am from anybody else, and consequently the more selective my empathy becomes. Moreover, many things I previously thought of as universally and tragically significant, I see now as ridiculously petty, blown all out of proportion, and amateurishly contrived. For it is getting increasingly harder and harder for me to have sympathy for someone who suffers from the absence of what I have learned long time ago to do without. And since in my case, this process of self-denial, both voluntary and involuntary, never stops, it is no wonder that as years go by, the number of people I feel deserve my sympathy is getting smaller all the time. Page 73. One who has been counting for too long on tomorrows is bound to be rudely awakened one day by the realization that all his tomorrows have become yesterdays and there are none more left where they came from. 874. The production and distribution of truth must be the most unprofitable of all human pursuits. For not only very few are willing to buy the truth, but even if it's offered for free, the overwhelming majority won't take it. The truth peddling must also be the most thankless and even hazardous vocation. For truth, more often than not, is but an intrusion of reality in the personal world of illusion, fantasy, and dreams. No wonder then that it is treated by all as a bad news, and the fate of the messenger of the bad news is all too familiar to everybody. 875. No definitely means no. Moreover, both sexes are equally entitled to use such a categorical and uncompromising expression to defend one's personal integrity and dignity. They consequently have to respect the absolute and unequivocal right of the other side to say it too. That is, the right of a woman to refuse men's stubborn, despite being unwelcome sexual demands, and equally valid right of a man to resist a persistent attempt by a woman to always have her way in other personal and domestic matters. 876. Man will forever be subjected to manipulation and domination by the very women they try to relate to, not just as a sex object, but as a human beings, like themselves. For on the level playing field, which is gender equality produces, women are infinitely more skillful and sophisticated players in the game of relationship than men are. On their part, the majority of women would usually repay such men's magnanimity with more or less disguised contempt, or sometimes even with the outright scorn, as the powerful are usually displayed over the weak. On the other hand, against the men who see them as nothing but the sexual objects, the women are not only essentially powerless, but paradoxically attracted to such men. Furthermore, as far as men are concerned, treating women as simply as the sex objects makes men feel being in control and give them a sense of freedom from manipulation. They sense the first intuitively and later learn by experience that this is the only way they can win the war of the sexes. Thus the so-called male chauvinism is often but the protective armor the men put on to fight this endless battle. 877. It is better to carry an umbrella when it doesn't rain than not to have it when it does. 878. I suspect that man's ageless obsession with a fast-moving means of transportation, like horses and chariots, boats and ships, trains and cars, airplanes and rockets, etc., has something to do with man's equally perennial urge to escape as far as possible, the so-called man's duties and responsibilities. While 879. While success feels mostly self-explanatory and seldom needs further justification by itself, failure is forever looking for its causes.